Everyone else for coming. It does say in the panel discussion that I will talk about Blanky. I'm not. Feel free to ask about him during the question and answer period. I did just publish a book, and if you are a publisher, I do want to talk to you especially. So, yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I think something since Joe brought up the Haitian Revolution, there's something we should recognize about Gracchus Babeuf, is that unique among the men who made the French Revolution, he was not only a communist, he believed in women's equality, he was an anti-colonialist and an anti-racist who praised the abolition of slavery in the French colony of Haiti. And for Gracchus Babeuf, he was active in various stages of the French Revolution. He served in the Jacobin administration, was in prison several times. He did peasant agitation. But what we most know about him and where he's justly famous is for what I call 40 days and nights of communist revolution in March, April, and May of 1796, where he's engaged in a political struggle to overthrow the French Directory, which had replaced the radical Jacobins. And in that moment of those 40 days and 40 nights, it prefigures radical communist practice of the next century and a half or more. And what Babeuf is significant for us because he takes communism out of the realm of utopian speculation and made it a political ideal worth struggling for. Babeuf accomplished this by uniting theory and practice in the shape of a revolutionary vanguard political organization that was linked intimately to the masses of the people, secretive only by necessity, and aiming at the seizure of state power to usher in communism. And I want to focus on 4 elements of that. And first of all, what I call the presentation of truth. And we should remember that the French Revolution is an immense shakeup. In 1789, France was an absolute monarchy. Within a few years, the radical Jacobins come into power to defend the embattled republic from treason within, to defend revolutionary gains, and to guillotine the aristocrats and make sure the people were fed. As someone remarked after the overthrow of Robespierre, when blood ran, we had bread. Now that there is no blood running, we have no bread. For the French popular masses, the Jacobins were ensuring their safety, their security, their right to life, as opposed to every other French regime. And the Jacobins, even though I would proudly stand beside Robespierre and the convention, had their limitations. These were not communists. They were not socialists. They wanted a society of small property-owning people, and they think that an appeal to virtue and love of homeland was going to solve the immense contradictions that were opening up in the French Revolution. And even though the Jacobins did institute a constitution, which is very important, of 1793, that ensured democratic and social rights, it was not implemented, and after their overthrow, it was replaced by an anti-democratic constitution. Now, these knots of the Jacobin contradictions needed to be overcome. How do you keep the revolution going if the Jacobin ideal cannot be realized because it is a fantasy? And this is where Babeuf comes in, and he affirms a political truth after the overthrow of the Jacobins, a political truth that aims at the emancipation of humanity. And despite my often annoyance with Alain Badiou, I think he is correct on what a political truth articulates 4 determinations. Number 1, will against socioeconomic necessity. Number 2, equality against the established hierarchies of power or wealth. Confidence against anti-popular suspicion or the fear of the masses. Authority or terror against the natural free play of competition. This is the generic kernel of a political truth of this type, i.e. an emancipatory truth. Babeuf recognized that you needed the support of the people. He recognized that someone needed to begin, and he was willing, as a revolutionary, to make very tough choices. And he said, referring to Robespierre, but very much to himself, a revolutionary must mow down everything that gets in his way, everything that obstructs his route, everything that can prevent him from arriving promptly at the end he has set for himself. And that is the hard choice he was willing to do. And we should remember that Saint-Just said, one cannot govern innocently. Those who expect a pure social revolution will never live to see it. Now, the second part of Babeuf, of the four elements, is his journalism, what I call the Tribune of the People, which is actually the name of one of his journals. Babeuf was a pioneer in this. In Paris in 1789, he was publishing a journal in his among the provinces. He was campaigning with the peasantry against feudal taxes. And in Paris, both before and after the overthrow of the Jacobins, he was a pioneer in journalism. And it was meant to draw people into the struggle. Babeuf's journalism is actually, let me just find the correct quote, he would say on a particular struggle, say anti-feudal laws and taxes, he would draw this particular struggle and draw it to why we need to abolish feudalism entirely, why it needs to just be doused in gasoline and blown up. And he used this to draw people in, to educate them. And initially he doesn't have a political organization, but he uses the newspaper as an agitator that would be present in all revolutionary efforts, including when he actually has an organization. In fact, Babeuf's newspaper would prefigure that of Lenin, who actually, you'll see some kind of linkages to Babeuf. He says that the social democratic's ideal should not be the trade union secretary, but the tribune of the people who is able to react to every manifestation of tyranny and oppression, no matter where it appears, no matter what stratum or class of the people it affects, who is able to generalize all these manifestations and produce a single picture of police violence and capitalist exploitation, who is able to take advantage of every event, however small, in order to set forth before all his socialist convictions and his democratic demands, in order to clarify for all and everyone the world's historic significance of the struggle for the emancipation of the proletariat. Granting for time differences between Lenin's time and Babeuf's, this is very much how Babeuf operated. And that draws us into, if Babeuf is trying to draw people into the struggle, he needs social agents. Babeuf, like many thinkers at the time, such as Rousseau, Malby, they envisioned how a future just society would look, an egalitarian society. But Babeuf criticized these thinkers not because of their imaginings of the future. He said at one point, a society without private property, I'd be the first one to emigrate there. But he said, these people have no way to connect their ends to their means. And this brings us to his development of a revolutionary political organization, particularly after, in 1796. And everyone here will actually get this joke, I hope. But I was arguing with a friend about this who happens to be an autonomist, and he criticized Babeuf for being a vanguardist, to which I can only say that's why he was effective. You know, Babeuf recognized that someone has to begin the struggle. There's the importance of leadership, discipline, and centralization, and he was secretive only by necessity. Whenever he could, he operated openly. When the state is going to arrest you for criticizing them, it may be a good idea to consider clandestine forms of operation. And even though Babeuf was secretive in his political organization, he said, we conspire openly, which meant a whole range of modes to reach the population, through posters, through newspapers, through songs, through people discussing in the streets. And his agents of his organization had to report back the popular mood, and they had to find reliable patriots who they could recruit. And they did agitate among the nascent working class. And part of the reason for his development of a political organization was after the Jacobins had been overthrown, there was actually an attempt, there were two uprisings in Paris that failed. And part of their failure was the class contradictions of the popular masses at that time, but more importantly was the fact that there was actually no leadership. At one point the masses said to the Jacobins who were still at liberty, take over, take control, and they said no, which pretty stupid, because if you can actually take power, why would you refuse? So, again, this organization is meant to fan the flames of discontent. And so this brings us to the fourth of Babeuf's key insights, which is the development of revolutionary political strategy. So Babeuf, he not only works among the workers, the sans-culottes, among the Parisians, he's also working with other left-wing political forces, Jacobins, Republicans, some quasi-anarchists as well. And he's doing what someone I very much admire said, he's building upon the strengths with others and not their weaknesses. He's trying to find what he can unite them on to get them part of a united political front. And this is the use of transitional demands, particularly around two things in 1796, which is bread, because most of the population was starving, at least in Paris, and the demand for the Constitution of 1793, which again promises social and democratic rights for the people. But Babeuf has a problem with these two things, which the other forces that he's uniting with uphold. Jacobins want to go back. They think that their ideal is great. Babeuf recognizes that, for one thing, that the Constitution protects the right to private property, but he wants to push past that. But by advocating the Constitution of 1793, and that advocation of that Constitution was outlawed by the government, they were calling the whole post-Robespierre society into question, and that would unite a lot of people behind them. The demand for bread would clearly unite them as well. So those unifications would push past. They're not calling for communism per se, but they are pushing past it. They are pushing past the current society. And the reason why Babeuf has a leadership role as opposed to the Jacobins or someone else is the fact that he has this ideal. His comrades and him are putting in the energy and the organizing. They have a fixed end in aim. And they form a communist pole within this united front. They are the recognized leadership, and they are willing to work with others, but it is clearly on their terms. Now, they do reach the masses, they do reach the population, because during this unique moment in 1796, the death penalty was actually put in place for advocating of the Constitution. And Babeuf's strategy, furthermore, also entailed the use of not only reaching the masses to get them to rise up, but a military strike against the government, which meant infiltrating the army to split it, encouraging propaganda and disaffection, and they had agents in the police forces. At one point, there was actually mutiny among the police in Paris. I mean, it's kind of unusual because, police are seem to be more loyal to the state than the army half the time. But Babeuf's forces were not able to take advantage of that, and they lost their best chance for a coup. And his strategy also involved the recognition, drawing upon the Jacobins, of the need for a revolutionary dictatorship to put down the counter-revolution. Now, he had rather utopian ideas, I think, about the duration of this. He thought it could last 3 months. I'm pretty sure that was not going to work. But it was a recognition of something that would be ignored by others. And I did kind of want to share something about the revolutionary energy of Gracchus Babeuf. In this, it's like this. Some people have tried to say like he was unclear about what he wanted, that he was just a utopian. Babeuf breaks with utopian socialism literally before it really emerges. With utopian socialists have these wonderful ideas about future societies they want to build, but they have a very reformist political practice of appealing to kings and aristocrats. Babeuf says, on the other hand, after the Directory starts beating up former Jacobins, if you want a civil war, you can have it. You've told your people to be ready. You cried to arms. We've said the same to our people. Our workers, our districts are already lined up. They're asking if it will be soon. So as opposed to the myth that revolutionaries opposed gun ownership, that was not quite his intention. So Babeuf, unfortunately, his organization was infiltrated by a police agent who was a member of the French army, and he was actually able to expose them days before their attempted coup, and they were arrested. They had no second tier of leadership, and the uprisings that did occur were sporadic and ineffective. So some of the historians I've reviewed have criticized Babeuf's efforts as being utopian and futile, as doomed to failure due to the undeveloped subjective and or objective conditions that existed in France at the time. If France was only open for a bourgeois revolution, what was the point of trying to struggle for communism in that decisive moment? But we should remember Babeuf had to fight in his own moment and his own time, not in ours. And he put his head on the line, where others, our practical thinkers today, would not have struggled. And if those who came after Babeuf knew much more about history, and they knew slightly more about what was historically feasible, it was because that Babeuf was willing to test everything and push the limits of what was possible. And by that effort, his soul, as it was said of another great revolutionary, went marching on. And Marx and Engels very much operated in the organizing method of Gracchus Babeuf. Lenin operated in that method. And at the opening Congress of the Third International, it was declared that we communists stand in the footsteps of Gracchus Babeuf, Rosa Luxemburg, and Karl Liebknecht, which was very much true. So you need those premature attempts to prepare the way for the future. The struggle isn't premature. It has to occur. And that is the significance I draw from Gracchus Babeuf, so thank you very much.